Remember, everyone, spoilers ahead. Zaheer is an incredible villain for Korra to have to face. Once again, we're playing off of the idea that Korra's lack of spirituality is a huge detriment to her actual progress as the Avatar. Zaheer being much more in tune with the spirits makes him a much scarier opponent for her to have to deal with. But it's the fact that he gains these airbending skills and how he uses them that's so freaky. Or not necessarily freaky. It's actually very cool, but, scary from her point of view. Even the way he fights with the airbending is almost more akin to what you would actually expect the air nomads to fight like. I mean that in the fact that I feel like Zaheer moved a lot more like Aang than Tenzen ever did. Even when Tenzen goes for a nimble approach, he still looks quite stiff. Zaheer, on the other hand, seemed more like he would contort his body to whatever situation he needed it to be in. Aang always fought like that. Aang was very much based on avoidance, and Zaheer, I think, fights in a very similar way to him, as opposed to Tenzen's much more stern approach to combat. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, let's talk about how the world adapts to its spiritual awakening. Most of the nations adapt with minimal to no effort, Republic City being the only one that can't seem to coincide with the spirits. A further reinforcement of Republic City's lack of spirituality or even its own desire to grow. I think the spirits recognize this, and that is precisely why they grow the vines right in the middle of everything. Airbending returning to the world showed an interesting thought experiment on what culture really is. I thought this was a very interesting subject matter, right? Airbenders used to always be born into air nomadic households. However, this season showed many people from all over the Earth Kingdom gaining airbending. Tenzen believes that it's not only their duty, but their privilege to come live as an air nomad, but realistically, nomadic heritage is not a part of these individuals' cultural upbringing. So why would it be right to call it their culture? The argument pitches spiritual connections versus physical ones like family and place of birth. The culture is within the idea that the spirits would grant these individuals specifically with this power. I'd like to know what you guys believe the true definition of culture to be. Not only what your answer is, but what the answers you can perceive others embrace as well. I feel like culture is such a vague term in most cases, because it could be music, it could be art, but it could also be stories. It could be the way you dress. There's so many different ways to express one's culture. And I think it's sort of interesting that Tenzen believes that just because these people are now are airbenders, not even air nomads, but are airbenders, that they should change their whole life to reflect this. It's hard to say that that's their culture, is all I'm saying. One such person blessed by the spirits with airbending is a man named Zaheer. A man that has studied many of the ancient teachings of air nomadic culture and holds a strong charisma, capable of inspiring his party to rally under him even after 13 years. He is a man that values freedom above all else and wants nothing more than to bring balance to the world in his way. In his own way, of course. He is, of course, combating a more enlightened Korra, one that has grown in maturity from the last 2 seasons. She's a woman that believes to know how this world is meant to function. Her destructive power far outweighs anything the world has to offer, and she will use it to protect the current status quo. Order is what Korra desires to preserve so as to avoid the chaos of Zaheer's anarchist ideals. But it is freedom that Zaheer believes himself to represent in this world wrought with authoritarian control. The fight that takes place among the spires of stone and shallow puddles is a direct mirror image of the final fight between Aang and Fire Lord Ozai. Even if we look at how they fought specifically, like how Aang and Zaheer have no desire to actually engage in combat, rather taking the airbender approach of avoiding conflict, juxtaposed by Korra's aggressive, almost urgent need to fight in this battle, just like Ozai. If the last Airbenders battle was represented by the Rising Sun, then it's only fitting that Korra's be represented by the Gathering Storm. Korra did an amazing job this season. She took a much more democratic approach. She listens to the counsel of not only her friends and family, but she also finally managed to stay in a land where she was content adhering to their strict rules. First time in this whole show. She felt less like a brash teenager and more like a leader coming into her own. A leader that the world clearly needs after the drastic changes to it. She helps with the rebuilding of a culture with Tenzen, becomes the first avatar to metal bend with the tutelage of Su, but most importantly, she learns when not to use force, thanks to the threat of Zaheer. The Rising Sun represented the rise of the Avatar's influence on the world again, while the Gathering Storm represents the worst has yet to come. Being the first Avatar that goes between the worlds freely is going to be a daunting task, especially since she no longer has a connection with her past selves. Korra can no longer simply be the strongest in the room physically, she must also be the strongest mentally, spiritually, and of course, politically. Overall, I love this show. Okay, I wasn't going to mention this, but Zaheer's handling of the Air Nomad situation, not a fan. I feel like it goes against all the principles that he, was trying to get across for the entire season. Violence should almost be a means to an end, not necessarily something that you actively seek out, I guess. I know he's a criminal. I'm not going to deny that he has killed plenty, but there's something about him... There's something about the fact that he's okay with killing the air nomads of a new generation that got under my skin. Why deceive them hiding the air nomads if he had no intention of releasing them at all? So he just lied, is what I'm saying. And if deceit was his game, then he defeats the purpose of the free world that he's trying to bring about. You see, if you can't trust one another or agree on how to handle a situation, then that's when a third higher power gets involved. Hence, a government that he is trying to destroy. I get that the climax is made more interesting with the deceit, but conceptually, I thought it would have made more sense, honestly, if you just had them take Korra away and then use Korra as the distraction for everybody else to try and save her, or something. Or better yet, he just says that he will only return the Benders after he is done with Korra, and we have to bust them out, early or something. I don't know. I mean, if he didn't directly state he had the respect for their air... if he didn't directly state that he had the respect for the air nomads, he certainly had respect for Guru Lahima. And I feel like that should be enough to think twice about wiping out a whole culture again. The threat is within reason for a criminal, of course, but I feel like actually going through with anything of the sort really goes against the principles he had been teaching all season.